Great. It's wonderful to see you guys. Thanks for coming. We actually were kind of surprised. We have a little over 200 people that are registered for this webinar, and which is always exciting. You know, we love to have these people coming in. But what's interesting is we expect only, let's say 45, 50, 55 people to show up. But we are recording this, and people watch it via the webinar, the recordings that we do from Zoom. And we also put it on air as a podcast. So if you are driving to visit family or friends this weekend, perfect thing to listen to. Throw this recording to your friends. Love it. I love to get educated while I'm in the car racing to meet a client, right? That's what we do. This is a great webinar, and I want you to know that it's your webinar. So if you move your mouse and you go to the bottom of the screen, you're going to see the green share button. If you click on the button next to it, which is the chat, please do me a favor, and if you don't mind, type in your name and where you are from. I love to see these people from all over the country. I already see Bob Esqueri, who's from Florida. I see Stephanie, she's from Canada. That's really cool. And Tracy from Maryland, Jean from New Jersey. I love this stuff. And Thea from Inverness, Illinois. And we've got Jackie from Alabama, Virginia, New Jersey. We got a lot of you guys. So thank you so much for joining us. Ooh, Tallahassee in New Hampshire. All right, all over the country, which is really nice to see. And use this chat box. I read your questions as they come out. We really want to hear from you. It's your webinar. You took the time to show up. We've got two great presenters with us. Unfortunately, Rosie couldn't join us. She'll join us on a future webinar. But we've got Dietrich Smith. Dietrich has a degree in kinesiology, and he also is the owner of Results Performance Training Studio. It's a very successful personal training studio, and he's dedicated over 2 decades of experience to help trainers cultivate fulfilling, lucrative, underline lucrative, lifetime careers in fitness. And he works as a mentor. So what he does is he takes trainers like you guys that are on this call, and he mentors you guys and helps you, frankly, make the money that you deserve to make. He's also written several well-respected publications. He's been published in Men's Health. He's been published in Muscle and Fitness and NSCA's journal. Very well-educated individual. And he also works with NSCA as a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and American College of Sports Medicine exercise physiologist, blah, 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 blah. Sorry, Dietrich, I could go on and on. But then we also have Dr. Jonathan Mike. So what I love about this is I can call him John, I can call him Mike, I can call him Hey You, I can do whatever. So it's great. He is a PhD. He currently teaches in the exercise science and sports performance programs at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona. He's a strength and conditioning coach. He's contributed to dozens of online strength and consumer outlets in the country. He has been involved with NSCA on various committees, which is really interesting. And he's spoken at over 55 events, including many for NSCA, ISSA, SCW, of course, NASM. He's also written chapters in multiple books. And then what he's doing is he's currently writing a book for Human Kinetics on strongman training for strength and performance. Okay, and I'm Sarah Cooperman, and I'm the S of SCW, and that's what I do. And I love doing, I know, I have so many credentials. Yeah, I'm a licensed attorney that doesn't practice anymore, really. I play one on TV. No, I play one on the internet. So we're going to talk about some cool topics here. What are some common myths and misconceptions about strength training? And how can we debunk them? I mean, Dietrich, what do you do with your clients?
As far as common myths and misconceptions here, I made a list of quite a few. There's a million of them. I know we've all heard that strength training, a lot of women will say that strength training will make them bulky, and that is not true. unless they're taking, drugs and steroids and different things to do that, they're not going to become bulky from lifting weights there. Other common myths, if you don't have the time to be in the gym 5 to 6 days per week, it's not doing anything yet. If you're able to get in 2 or 3 quality sessions per week, you'll still be able to get, the benefits of strength training. Another one, like I said, I have quite a few here if you want me to just keep going, but the spot reduction one, where people will think that if they do a million exercises for their abs or a certain body part, that's just all the fat's gonna go away because they did that and they're still eating what they were eating before. So I've heard people say that strength training makes them maybe less, that people think that it's going to make them less flexible, or it's going to decrease mobility, when in fact it's going to improve those things, flexibility and mobility.
All right, let's start with that one, because honestly, everybody's focusing on recovery now. Recovery, physical, mental, etc. And it's very important. But we think about recovery, and we also think about some of the flexibility exercises. Can you physiologically explain to us why, if I strength train, it really doesn't negatively affect my flexibility and may in fact help it?
Yes. So, I mean, as far as if you're doing your strength training through a full range of motion, it's going to improve your flexibility and mobility there. So, and just combining that with a program, a well-rounded program too. Of course, you're still doing your strength, your flexibility work, your soft tissue work, whether that's different forms of massage, foam rolling, and different things like that. So it's going to improve, flexibility and mobility if someone's doing different forms of, say, like a squat, going through a full range of motion. That's going to improve that hip mobility there, or going through a full range of motion on certain exercises there. It's going to improve that. I know sometimes people.
Sometimes you see these people that don't exercise, and they're the ones that are immobile.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. And John, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we could probably spend an entire podcast just going over like that first question alone. I mean, there's so many different ones, but there's so many commonalities across the board. I mean, obviously, we could talk about how people just don't want to live because they're going to turn in from, Hulk from Avengers and all this other stuff, particularly with women. But, one of the probably on a fundamental level is you have to get people more educated about the benefits of strength training first, and actually show them by doing and giving them a broad but yet detailed overview of like all the benefits, both physiologically, but above and beyond that, like what it actually does with quality of life. I mean, most people don't want to take the time to actually read high quality, whether it's scientific reviews or research or text. They just believe something off the internet that they spent 45 seconds, with their attention on, and they think like that's kind of like, the end all be all, or like I read it somewhere, so that's just true. Certainly the media propaganda and the fitness propaganda stuff doesn't really help at all. So I mean, I do spend a pretty good amount of my time throughout the year, whether it's speaking or doing stuff like this, and actually educating individuals on all the benefits that it has, both physiologically and whether it's recovery, supplements, basic nutrition stuff. So, most people need a better basic, rudimentary, elementary understanding of all the benefit stuff, so they can have a better idea. You can persuade them and convince them, on more of obviously an ethical basis, to get them to start moving their body. I mean, you look at the numbers. I mean, 45% of the US is overweight or obese. I mean, most people can't even do like 10 bodyweight push-ups or 10 bodyweight squats, so it's, you have to get these people educated enough to start moving, and hold them accountable for the things that they need.
And I'm wondering, when I was coaching a lot and doing a lot of personal training, I actually would print out articles that I found that I liked, that I knew show the benefits of strength training, reinforce like what Dietrich said, that women cannot get bulky. They just simply don't have the hormonal matrix to produce these huge muscles they think they anticipate. But I would produce these articles and photocopy them and give them to my clients. And I thought that was a wonderful way to help them. We're gonna publish an article, I think, on the benefits of building muscle in our Spotlight newsletter, and you guys can, you know, print it out, photocopy it for your clients. Do you find that merely saying it will get them to listen to you? Like, Dietrich, how do you get them to believe you?
I think, you know, you have to meet them where they're at and take them through a process and kind of transition them, because you just overload them with all this information at the console, don't break it down into their language, then it's going to be a little overwhelming and you might lose them from the start, because most of our members, or most of the people that are coming to us for help, have done absolutely nothing. And some of them might have grew up in an era where, I mean, strength training was just a no-no completely. Yeah. Some of the people that we had that might be, you know, older. So I think you have to meet them where they're at, constantly educate them, but break it down into something that they'll actually understand, and meet them where they're at, and then kind of gradually take them, gradually take them through that process.
Right. John, what do you think on that? Like,
Yeah,
how do
pretty
you
much
get them to believe you?
Well, you have to lead, right? You got to lead by example. When I hear people say, well, how do I do that? It's easy. You do it, right? Trainers and clients, you can't just tell them what to do. Like, you actually have to show them, what to do. If you're limited in experiences and exposures, then you will be limited with your experiences and exposures with training a wide variety of clients, and even limited experiences, exposures with programming. So you actually have to do it, right? I mean, you have to live it, you have to breathe it, but you have to lead by example. But you also have to provide and break down information on their specific level. They don't care about they don't care about things like protein synthesis or like hypertrophy. So there's no use in using terms and jargon that they're not, either they don't really care about, or they're not really going to understand, especially at the beginning. You need to relate it to where, okay, what problem are you ultimately trying to solve? I try to come at it from a business perspective, like what problem or problems that you're ultimately trying to solve for them, because you have to fit programs and fit the person to specific exercises, for example, and not the other way around. There's more to training than just barbells and kettlebells and dumbbells, right? So that's a whole different issue, obviously, with the programming side. But yeah, not only you have to meet them where they are, but a lot of times trainers and coaches have not just high expectations, but unrealistic expectations, especially at first. And you're going to have to lower yourself to meet them, so you can just get them down to just do basic actionable steps. Are they drinking enough water? What's their daily nutrition like? Are you cleaning up their diet? What's their sleep like? Like, you have to do the basics first, and then once they have that, develop the patterns and develop the consistency and the small wins over and over and over again. Those actually add up to very large victories, and then you can. Once they have a pattern, a habit developed, then you can add on something else, right? Most people want to fix 10 things at one time. It's the wrong approach. Fix 2 things at one time, right? Because a lot of times, especially with training or programming, those 10 things that you need to correct end up self-correcting once they get in better body positions, for example. So that's more on the training or programming side. But yeah, you need to lead, right? And ultimately, especially from a nutritional perspective, people have a very large emotional connection with food, right? And they also have emotional connections with different types of training methods and certain types of exercises. And so getting them to kind of unlearn to relearn new things is certainly a challenge, and it often takes longer, than you anticipate.
Right, definitely. And that nutrition element is so very important. How does strength training contribute to overall health and wellness? Dietrich, you wanna attack that one?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many benefits in regards to health and wellness, and as far as maintaining your muscle tissue as you age, there, improve bone health, controlling body fat, decrease risk of injury, falls there, cardiovascular health, managing blood sugar, brain health. So there's so many different benefits that we could kind of go on and on about with that.
Yeah. And I think, John, you mentioned you just started talking a little bit about sleep.
Yeah.
Which I think is, oh my gosh, that's another buzzword. You know, it's like recovery and it's sleep and you got to sleep 8 hours. I'm like, yeah, you have 4 children and a dog, 8 hours. That's like I don't know, that's a small vacation for me.
Yeah.
But how do we integrate that in? What are some of the specific benefits to building muscle? And then I'll ask you separately.
Yeah, I think building muscle is obviously probably one of the most important things you can do, not only in life, but it's definitely the building muscle and just strength training in general is definitely the closest thing to the fountain of youth that people are really ever going to get to. It has so many benefits. It's beyond most people's comprehension, right? I mean, you're talking about decrease in, risk and falls and fractures and all that, decrease in, for women, osteoporosis, and building higher amounts of bone mineral density, especially as women age, in men too, you have increases in sarcopenia. So lifting heavier loads obviously decreases risk from a nutritional protein perspective. As you get older and age, your body becomes more resistant to the anabolic effects of amino acids. So you actually need a little bit more protein per sitting and or per meal or really throughout the day to maintain a respectable level of protein synthesis in order to maintain lean body mass. So all the physiological benefits, but also like you transfer that over to the cognitive side. There's direct relationships to lack of exercise and lack of strength training to a higher increase in terms of Alzheimer's risk, osteoporosis, and all the other disease risk and disabilities.
Dementia.
Yep.
There's just was a recent study that was published documenting that dementia and Alzheimer's, that you can't reverse the effects through exercise, but you can help with maintenance and help with some of the effects, that present themselves. So that was fascinating, and that was very well documented. And we did get a great question from Thea. She wanted to know about the importance of strength training in women post-menopause.
Okay, so I think in the importance of strength training, there's never too late to really start, right? But the younger you are, the better it is, because you can decrease disease risk and you can start to, because bone turnover, this is what people don't get. Like building muscle in and of itself, like on the long spectrum, takes less time than building and bone turnover. Like bone turnover happens like over a period of like several months. Like you get a bone density scan, DEXA, for example, like you don't get one like every 6 weeks. Like you get one like once a year. So as you increase lean body mass and as you get stronger, so does the connective tissue and so does bone remodeling and bone turnover, because you have to have both sides of the structure, so to speak, in order to sustain whatever muscle mass that you have, right? You can't just build lean muscle mass. Like you have to build like the structure and the bricks, the concrete and all that stuff. So that's more like the bone and connective tissue. So building that earlier on in life will help again, decrease risk of falls and fractures, but post-menopause, where you have decreases in obviously estrogen production, you can't necessarily like totally reverse that, but you can help decrease and offset it by lifting heavier and cleaning up your nutrition, obviously with higher protein, but also getting blood work done, a couple of times a year to actually see where you are with a full hormonal panel. And
it's important to get the full panel. Because it's not just the decrease in estrogen. Women have testosterone,
that's right,
and they end up losing it. And that also has a tremendous negative effect as well. And we don't think about that as women, as postpartum women. I'm saying we don't, like Dietrich and you are postpartum women. But for me, and for a lot of people that are listening in on this webinar, we think about that, but we forget about the testosterone. We don't, and by the same token, men sometimes might forget about the estrogen. What's also fascinating is if you get that reduction, which happens later in life, in progesterone, that also affects your cognitive skills, which is really interesting. I always think about memory, and especially because I deal with a lot of active agers, and it's that balancing of hormones. Dietrich, what are your thoughts about how hormones do affect your strength training and your ability to strength train?
As far as how your hormones, I mean, as far as the strength training is going to allow you to maintain certain levels, but if you're talking about like testosterone in particular, I guess is what you're saying. I mean, as far as certain, compound movements that will allow you to increase testosterone and different hormones. But, over time, as you age, you're going to have to, continue to do the strength training in order to maintain that muscle. It's going to be a little bit harder. I mean, your testosterone, for men in particular, testosterone levels are going to be, decreasing over time there. So Dr. Mike said, the sooner you get started, the better to be able to build muscle so that you're able to continue the strength training, do your best to maintain that over time. Because, it is easier if you're talking in regards to like testosterone and different hormones, while you have the advantage of having those higher levels.
And Dr. Mike, what are your thoughts on hormone replacement therapy, not only for women, but also for men?
It's an interesting question. I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. We were actually talking about this very same topic. When you talk about hormonal replacement therapy, the vast majority of it, in terms of what's actually discussed in terms of gender, is actually men, not women, right? But it should be talked about more with women because there's different physiological effects, right? For both men and women. Obviously, estrogen production goes down with women and testosterone production goes down with men. When you talk about like hormone replacement therapy or TRT or testosterone replacement therapy, the vast majority of people think it's actually not men, but actually, well, you have to be over 50 or 60 to get TRT. And I'm sorry to inform you, but that is not the case. That's very untrue. That's false. Because I've come across a lot of individuals, guys, in their late 20s and early 30s of the day, their testosterone is that of like a 70-year-old. It's extremely low. You look at the kind of the basic number panel range of testosterone is like 300 to about 1,000 nanograms per deciliter, and some of these dudes are at 150, 200, right? And these are guys in their 27, they're 28 years old, or 32, at a time in life where peak testosterone production is late 20s, early 30s, particularly when you're lifting, because peak muscle mass doesn't really occur to around 30 years old for most people. So, because of, things like military industrial complex and poor eating habits, and additives and preservatives in plastics, like in food, those have contributed more environmentally to lower testosterone production, in men, coupled with, unhealthy lifestyles and not getting into the gym and increases in body fat. So yeah, I mean, TRT, hormone replacement therapy, is very effective and it does work, but you don't have to be like 55 or 60 years old. There's a lot of people, younger guys, that do have to have TRT, maybe because of either poor lifestyle or maybe, genetic, issues. And that's perfectly okay, right? So yeah, it is important to get your blood levels checked because I can tell you both from the science that having, and this is for women too, having lower estrogen levels and having lower testosterone levels, you are at far more risk for any type of disease or disability having lower levels than you are by having moderate to high levels.
That's interesting. That really is interesting. And how do experienced lifters continue to challenge themselves and avoid plateauing? Dietrich, what do you think about that? How can they avoid plateauing without just increasing the weight?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to make progress, but having a plan as far as periodization, switching up phases with your volume and your intensity throughout the year, rep schemes, exercises, various different techniques for intensity, paying attention to recovery is going to be important, and finding the variety sweet spot for you. There's no like muscle confusion type thing. I know people talk about that there, but at the same time, sometimes finding that variety sweet spot will allow certain people to stay motivated. It might reduce as far as like overuse injuries for certain body parts, and keep it fun, staying motivated throughout the process, finding different variations of foundational movements. And I talk about it, avoiding injury with smart training too.
And you talked about periodization. Is there any special periodization technique that you particularly have been successful with?
There's so many different forms. I know like linear, when as people start off and people can continue that for a while, but you might have to go through as people progress and get more advanced. You might have to switch things up a little bit with that and have more of a focus on maybe increasing your volume during a certain period and then increasing the intensity over a certain period. And depending on what that individual specific goals are, I know, most of my people are general population, so it doesn't have to get too fancy. But depending on what that individual's goals are, there's so many different ways to kind of, switch things up there.
Yeah,
And that'll
provide
help
some
keep you
variety.
interested. I mean, there's different conjugate and, so many different ways to do things.
And if you, how do you integrate recovery?
As far as recovery, I mean, you have to pay attention to, sleep, nutrition, getting enough water, everything, and just also like soft tissue work too. And you have to kind of really pay attention to, tracking your weights over time and seeing where you're at and being able, if you're an experienced lifter too, you'll start to have a little bit more of a feel for things. I mean, it always helps to have a coach there, but if you've been doing it for a while, you will start to kind of get a feel to see if your numbers have been at the same time, if it's been at the same thing for a while, you might need to maybe hit certain movements a little bit less there and other movements a little bit more. Maybe you do a little more isolation work during certain periods so maybe you can't get to a point where you're deadlifting or squatting a certain amount. You're not going to be able to do that at the same amount of frequency. Or if you do that at a higher frequency, you really have to adjust the variables and be in control of that.
Yeah. I always think frequency, intensity, duration. Dr. Mike, periodization and recovery. There's so many fads. There's so many facts. There's so many things that are fake. But what are you seeing that's out there, and what do you think that might be the most effective?
On a general level, all forms of periodization work. And I say that because, and all of them have limitations, but from like more of an advanced, elite individual, like the conjugate training system is pretty much top notch because it kind of takes a combination of like linear, non-linear, like max strength, dynamic effort, which is speed oriented, and even a repetition method, which is really more considered like assistance exercises, for example. But I think for like most general, all forms, like I said, all forms of periodization, because even though there's like probably 12, 15 plus different types of form of periodization. The bottom line is that, and I've made some posts about this in the past, is that they're actually all forms of progressive overload in a sense. There's just different ways to really do it. Because even though like linear periodization, for example, yeah, you get better over time. And you start out with, max strength hypertrophy and, volume goes up, intensity goes down over time, or volume goes up. And then over time, volume goes down, intensity goes up. You have like non-linear, but basically in the grand scheme of things, 6 months, a year into it, like the whole point is to get stronger and to increase more performance. So all forms actually work. It's like which one is actually more customized for the person. And I would argue that for general population people, nobody cares about conjugate stuff as much. It's more like, are they getting stronger? Do they feel better? Are they decreasing body composition? Do their clothes fit better? They're less concerned about, oh my gosh, I got to go Monday because like I really got to work this linear periodization program. Like they're not as concerned with that, right? So different forms of periodization not only fit different individuals, but different types of athletes and or demographics.
Yeah, I like that. One thing I'm going to add here, guys, is you get to a certain age and maintenance is a goal. I hate to say it, and I'm going to say it, and someone will throw something at me. Thank God I have a screen in front of me. But,
so true.
But it is, maintenance is the goal. I feel like I'm in pretty darn good shape, and I'm 64 years old, but I atrophy much more quickly. Like I went on a 7-day bike ride. We were riding 40 miles a day, blah, blah, blah. I got back and I went back to my regular strength training, and it was not pretty. I mean, like I had really, my biceps, my tricep, my chest, my back was pretty good because I had done, you're on a bike, whatever. The legs were fine, but you atrophy more quickly, and maintenance is that goal. And I know we talked about protein. It is incredibly important for older adults to maintain their protein intake. And yet in some degrees, they have to reduce some of their calorie intake because possibly they're less active. And you know, your muscles atrophy, your muscles die. Their muscles begin to die at the age of 23. Guys, their muscle begins to die at age 28. I'm sorry, but you all are going to lose the battle. You're all going to die. Yeah, I know. Bob Square is laughing at his computer right now. But you know, you're on a losing curve here. But so maintenance can be a goal with us. And I did not ignore this question. I think it was Carol who asked, how do you feel about aqua strength training? And I'm telling you, I feel darn good about it. I love using aqua dumbbells. Do you know that the Water in Motion strength program, we have 3 Water in Motion programs: Original, Platinum, and Strength. And it's really cool. Original is 10 songs and it's upper body, lower body, core, and it's blah, blah, blah. And Platinum focuses 10 tracks also, but it focuses like on balance, on memory. It does focus on strength. It's cool. It's very manual dexterity, ankle mobility, the things you need as you actively age. The fastest growing Water in Motion program, Water in Motion Strength. And we're using aqua dumbbells. Now it's hard to train strength in water just because it's primarily concentric. You know, you're pushing and using those muscles concentrically. You're pulling, you're moving opposite muscles concentrically. It's hard to get the eccentric, the lowering with resistance, the lengthening of the angle of the lever with resistance. That's the difficulty strength training with water. And the difference also, it's not just frequency, intensity, duration. We've got to work with angle lever, surface space, buoyancy. We've got different elements of water to work with. So I love strength training in the pool. I just have to be cognizant that unless I can use a resistance band or possibly even a really, really heavy weight, I don't get the eccentric focus, but I'm strength training, okay? It might be a little more on the endurance side. Now, I'm gonna ask you, Dr. Mike, can you explain to us a little bit of what the difference is between some of the endurance training and some of the power training or strength training that you so elegantly specialize in?
Okay, so they're not mutually exclusive, right? They're very well blended. Traditionally, people like to divide strength training and endurance training as if like they're separate sets or totally separate repetitions. So like, for example, you'll read like in the textbooks of, muscular endurance is 3 sets of like 15 to 20 reps, and, power is 5 sets of 5 or 3 sets of 5 to 6. And then I always use this example, like when I've taught classes in the past, because a lot of people don't understand, they think, you're first of all, your brain doesn't know like what hypertrophy is, right? Your brain doesn't understand like, okay, I just did 12 reps. Well, if I go 13, 14, 15 reps, now all of a sudden, like I'm in like muscular endurance. The reality is that we like to kind of categorize things in this industry to make people feel better. But the reality is that your brain doesn't know what that means. It only knows like motor patterning and like motor unit recruitment, force production, neuroplasticity, which is a fancy term for gaining and maintaining strength and neural connections like over time and as you age and all that stuff. So what I would actually argue that those that are in endurance sports, is an important point. Those that are trained for more endurance sports, whether they're marathons or recreational running or a competition more, I would actually argue that heavier strength training and power output is actually more important because you get your endurance while you're doing the activity, right? Because there's so many different times with endurance events that you're not running on flat ground, you're running up hills, you're not just riding on flat surface, you're on intervals and different types of terrains to where you actually need to move your car in higher gear and ram up the horsepower 70, 80 miles an hour, so to speak, and you need that higher force and power output to get you through the next type of session or interval or whatever. So I would heavily argue that those that are competing in endurance sports actually do need to lift heavier incorporate more power output types of movements so they can, one, train all types of energy systems and then help them with strength and power at the times of those sports and events that you need the higher power output. That makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I think something that's also very interesting, and I brought this up before we turned the recording on, is I'm reading more and more about older adults and doing this powerlifting and doing power training.
Yeah.
Because the reality is you don't slowly lift a toddler. You don't gradually pull a granddaughter out from running in the street in front of a car. You know, it's not very easy and slow when you're pushing that kid on the swing. This is a lot of force, and it's also a lot of deceleration things that are happening, and you need that power. But if you do it within a training modality in a coaching setting, you get them warmed up properly. You get them performing the exercise safely in a correct range of motion with the correct activity. So I think this power training is very, very important. I worry sometimes about some of the programming I see in HIIT in a real large classroom situation, because it's so motivating and so exciting. I'm so worried some of my clients are going to injure themselves. CrossFit, I think, sometimes can get a little aggressive, but if you don't challenge yourself, I don't know, what's life about. We've got to do these things. Dietrich, what do you think about the power training, and how do you integrate it into your programming?
I think there's power training is important for everybody, but you have to kind of assess people and see where they're at. It's not just, talking about older or age per se. You have younger people that might be at a different level too. So, I mean, everybody doesn't have to be doing, say, like a hang clean or a power clean. This might look like a med ball slam for somebody. It might be certain other movements after they've mastered technique being done a little bit faster there. So there's so many different ways to get it done, but you have to really assess the individual first and kind of see where they're at. But power training is going to be important, to do that throughout life.
All right, I'm going to go into our next question. What are some effective ways to vary training intensity and volume in order to optimize strength gains? We know we need to do this, but help us here. Give me some different periodization techniques, some different equipment to use, or different ways in which to use it. Dietrich, you want to start?
Yeah, so effective ways to vary training intensity and volume. We've talked about different like periodization schemes, but I mean, really it's going to come down to switching up your rep ranges, intensity, having the periodization schemes. It could be training splits and different focuses that you have there. Kind of analyzing rest periods and different programs with that, whether it's like supersets, trisets, circuits, being able to switch things up for people, over time there, so that once again, it doesn't get boring and they stay motivated to train. It could be everything down from for people that are a little more advanced, having like deload and lighter weeks there. I say for people that are more advanced, really probably most of the people that are listening to this and the people that they're working with probably don't even fall into certain categories and things that we might be talking about. So I want to make sure we kind of, focus on the general population too, because I think that probably I know for me, that makes up 99% of our clients.
Do you have any favorite equipment that you particularly enjoy using, or that you found to be, that's new and fun? I feel like we get back from the pandemic, it's all about a kettle weight. We've never gotten any kettle weights for the past 2.5 years.
Yeah,
that's all I want to do.
Oh yeah, there's so many things. I mean, I love landmine training. I'm easy on the joints. There's so many different things and different angles you can go. You can hit exercises from different angles. So landmine is, one of my favorites there. Barbell training might not be for everyone. Some trainers are just so focused and locked in on barbell training, and it can be very, very, very effective as long as you use it the right way and with the right people. And there's also different forms of barbells too, or different forms of like hex bars and Swiss bars, and different ways to kind of have the angles so that it's a little bit easier on the joints there. But those are some of my favorite pieces of equipment, other than maybe the typical standard things that you would see at a lot of places.
That's great. And Dr. Mike, what are you finding that people are, attracted to, or what's new? I mean, we were flipping tires, we were slapping ropes. I mean,
Yeah, I think
what's some of the new things we can do?
I think one of the newer things, and this is why I like, obviously most people know I speak at a lot of events throughout the year, but I also like going to a lot of events, especially all the trade shows, because you can go hang out with different equipment companies and see what's going on. Some of the newer types of equipment companies is like Prime and Atlantis, particularly Prime, because you may have, like, for example, a row machine, or like a mid row, like a back row machine, right? So the difference is like what you find in most other gyms, the commercial gyms versus Prime. Nowadays, you have manufacturing of equipment that is purposely going towards maintaining or increasing the resistance profile throughout different parts of the range of motion. So for example, it might be, if you're doing like a row, for example, you start here and it's actually hardest from the beginning portion, and it's easiest as you actually move towards the into the concentric range, right? Or it's easiest at the beginning and harder mid-range, and then a normal type of resistance, towards the back end. So you're actually seeing that now with a lot of different types of equipment companies, and that's because like you can maintain a certain resistance profile throughout a given type of sets or repetitions, but it also allows individuals to stress that resistance profile at different points of the range of motion and then get stronger, over time. And that's one of the biggest limitations with, like, say, normal dumbbell or barbell training, with angles, for example, is that it's harder at one end, like, versus the other. Whereas, like, you're only as strong as the joint angles that you train at, right? And I've said that 1,000 times over the last several years. So you're only as strong as the joint angles that you train at. Also, especially if you're a competitor, as you become stronger, you become likely weaker. This is going to sound odd, but as you become stronger overall, your points of range of motion, become weaker as well. So let's take a deadlift, for example. Like, you're a powerlifter, for example. You might be really strong, like off the floor, but mid-range or lockout, you're weak, right? Or if you focus on mid-range, you're strong, and then lockout, you're strong, but off the floor, you're weak. So what that means is, as you become stronger overall, the points of range of motion maybe need a little bit more focus, right? So that's more of a practical, real world. Then you have also the example of some of the equipment companies that they're really focusing more on the resistance profile, and it's a massive game changer.
I've thought about that, about the different ranges of motions that you want the resistance. You can program it so the resistance is always all the way through that lever shortening or the lever lengthening. And the same thing happens with the musculature, of course, the muscle lengthening, the muscle shortening. And you need that strength at every angle, because you never know at what angle you're going to have to grab something. You're going to have to, throw a spear. You're going to, I'm talking about like the way we originally lived. It's now, I feel like it's throwing a spear is kind of walking through Whole Foods, looking for something that's on sale.
Yes.
All right. But real life, we're dealing with gravity. Do we really need every single range of motion strengthened? Okay. Or are we working more naturally with that kettlebell that I just criticized, of course, but because we're working against gravity, and we're working with a ball that is consistent weight all the way through the range. So I think that stuff interesting. Now, I did get a question here from Susan, and she asked, can we get stronger and more powerful at 62? We're not going to guess Susan's age, of course, when there are joint issues. And what about modality? I think she might mean mobility. I'm not quite sure. What do you think about that, Dietrich? Can you get stronger at age 62?
Can you get stronger as you get older with joint issues? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, when I read this question, it's pretty simple. Can you get stronger, more powerful at the age of 62? Can you train yourself to get stronger and more powerful?
Yes, of course. Yep. And you have to be, just like with any other age, it has to be smart training and program well, taking in consideration your individual, your previous exercise history, your injury history, but for sure, you can definitely get stronger at the age of 62 or any age.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. Mike, is there a specific way that you might recommend somebody get stronger?
I would focus more on total body movements and total body training. Kettlebell deadlifts, for example, if they can't get in a bottom position, elevated off the floor. Trap bar deadlifts, okay, because it's less technical demand, it's less central nervous system, demand. Medicine ball stuff, farmers carry, whether it's dumbbells, kettlebells, rowing, pull-ups, like just the basic elementary stuff, right? They don't need to be training for, competition unless they really want to, which is a very different types of specialized training. But, having overall total body strength, especially with the smaller muscle groups like, shoulders, low back, glutes especially, will do wonders in terms of quality of life, and you will be hundreds of miles, if not light years ahead of everybody else.
I think that's great. I can't believe this. This is almost the first time this has happened where I'm totally unaware. It's 5:46, and I'm going to show you guys what's going on at the end of July 21st through 23rd in Atlanta. And we're going to be in Dallas at the end of August. We're going to be in Chicago at the end of September. And we have our wonderful conferences coming up. So I'm going to show you a quick video here. So we sincerely hope we get to see you guys live at an event, live and in person. Dietrich and Dr. Mike are both going to be in Atlanta Mania. I know you see Bob Asquari on here. He always joins us at Mania conventions as well. And Dietrich, I know you're going to focus on business, which is really good because he has such a successful personal training business. And Dr. Mike, I know you're doing physical training workshops. You get involved in nutrition as well. And both of you guys are on panels because I beg you, and you're very generous with your time. So thank you for that. Thank you, Dietrich and Dr. Jonathan Mike, for joining us this evening. And I hope to see you all next Thursday. Take care and have a very happy and safe holiday weekend. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Carter.
Thank you.